Welcome to the season finale of The Unlicensed Therapist. Today, I'm sitting down with a round table of therapists in different phases of their careers, and I'm asking them all the questions that we've talked about over the last 12 episodes. And we're going to get their viewpoints, we're going to get their stories. So sit back, relax, and continue to be unlicensed and learn and grow as we talk back with our roundtable of therapists. Here we are with our roundtable of therapists, and to start out, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but with a question. Therapists, as you tell us a little bit about who you are, we'd also love to hear about what originally pulled you toward mental health work.
Well, I'll jump in. Jamie. See, I am currently working in a school district as a behavior specialist, but also originally by trade as an emotional support teacher. And what originally pulled me into towards the mental health work is the work that has presented blaringly from my students and their families. We have students and families in our society right now as well, where we know that mental health is a great need. The work, the support, the understanding is important and necessary. And more often than not, as a team and education, we're working to try to get our families and our students all that they stand in need of. And there was a bridge that needed to occur with understanding mental health more. So I'm working in the district and in the classrooms. That is what led me and drew me towards the work, because I wanted to be a support to families, teachers, students, schools, and knowing that gave me a drive to want to understand and delve even more into the world of mental health and having a better understanding. So I have to say that the Lord kind of gave it to me, kind of prompted me a long time ago, and I kind of think I was like, I'm going to just do what He told me over here. And then during COVID, He hit me over head with it again, like I told you. You're supposed to go this way. So, and that's my personal, my belief, my spiritual belief. But that was a part of what, again, brought me back to, okay, well, if this is what you're telling me to do, Lord, then all the doors will open. And they kind of did.
So, Jamie C., you and I have the similarity of jumping into the insanity of a master's program in the middle of a pandemic. And you very much sound like you were led through your spiritual higher power beliefs.
Kind of following up with Jamie, I kind of had a weirdly similar push spiritually. It was high school year, senior. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer for my entire life. Like 6th grade up, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Senior year, I did all the things. I was in public speaking, I was in mock trial club, and it was great. And then I realized I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to argue with people all day long. This is not what I want to do. And I was very, very lost. I had no idea what I wanted to go into, but I had a really good scholarship lined up for undergrad, so I had to go to school. I just didn't know what. And weirdly enough, me and my friends saw a psychic that summer. We all went, got our cards read, and during that card reading, she knew, for whatever reason, in her mystical ways, she knew that I was conflicted in what I wanted to do, and there were a couple paths in front of me, and she kind of asked me, almost looking back as a counselor, she asked me the miracle question. If you could do anything you wanted to do, what would it be? And I kind of looked at her, and it hit me. I was like, I either want to be a teacher or like a therapist. And that's a track I never even thought about, especially the therapy. The teacher a little bit, but I wasn't 100% sold on that. And she said this. She's like, that's what you will excel in. That's what you should pursue. And so I went home that day. I looked up programs within the school I was already committed to, and I found psychology. And then from there, I got my psychology undergrad, and I took a year off because I graduated right after COVID, so I wanted some time, took a year traveling, and then went into counseling for my master's, and I've been there ever since. And it's kind of crazy because I do see a lot of parallels with both tracks I was interested in. I work with adolescents. Before that, I worked with younger kids, and there's a lot of teaching involved with my job, so I kind of got to do both, which is pretty awesome.
So again, we have a theme of a calling, it sounds like, that pulled you into this field.
So my original plan, similar to the first two, was spiritual in nature. My first high school was to go to seminary. So while I was in seminary, I decided, and I was seeking out what was going wrong, because I felt a disalignment with what was going on in my inner world, that this wasn't what I was wanting to do. It actually sent me into a little bit of a depression. And I'm 20 years old. I'm dropped off in the middle of Chicago. I don't know what I want to do, but I do know that something similar to what I'm doing right now is what I want to be doing. And it was kind of a period of crisis, and I kind of sought out some different spiritual thinkers that were outside of the box of what I was currently doing. And along the way, this is 2014, mind you, along the way I discovered through reading some other spiritual authors the works of Carl Jung, which helped me to kind of understand that there's this different path of the thing that I wanted to be doing, which is deep speaking to the depths of humanity, but at the same time, doing it in a way that isn't bound by a specific dogmatic tradition. I can really be free to just explore where each individual flourishes and not have to worry about whether or not I'm going to upset somebody. And this took me a period of 5 years of soul searching. It wasn't until the fall of 2019 that I even applied to go to grad school. So through all of that soul searching, essentially, kind of led me to, pursue my MA in psychotherapy. And I just graduated this past year, although the current place that I'm at was kind enough to hire me while I was still in my master's program. So that was something that was nice to allow me to get a lot of the experience that I've gotten.
So Andrew, for you, not only was there a spiritual calling, but it sounds like through your research you found one of the founders of psychotherapy that you really felt a pull towards their work.
Yes, and it kind of spoke to, and it was sort of a light bulb moment slowly over time, that it was like, this was something that this was more aligned with what I was meant to be doing, and this kind of speaks to that calling of speaking to the spiritual needs of others, while at the same time, a lot of the drawbacks that I was experiencing while in seminary, it just wasn't there, like with this field. So it was really helpful.
I'm Jolie. I work in community mental health. I work with a pretty diverse population, pretty diverse age group at this point. I mean, I see my youngest client is 6, my youngest client I would say is 70. Mental health, and there is some overlap with drug and alcohol, so I do work with parole and probation. For me, since it's my path hasn't been a straight one to counseling. It's been a minute since I've been in high school. obviously not a traditional student age. I got out of high school, and I don't know that my grades, my family, the whole 9 yards at that time, I was college material financially, mentally, the whole 9 yards. So in the meantime, I raised a family and things like that. After I had my children, some experiences with my children, and several years ago, I decided to get my undergrad, not again the traditional age. I was a little older for my undergrad. It was a wonderful experience. Gained confidence for my undergrad. Again, based on some of those experiences and raising my own children and going through that undergrad and seeing the need of mental health counseling, I'm trying to continue on to the master's program. That's basically where I'm at today. Finding my way post-graduation. Like Andrew, I graduated just last year with my master's and went right into community mental health. So I have my LAPC, and I'm working one day at a time to figure out who I am.
Julie, don't feel alone. You're not the only non-traditional student, at this roundtable whatsoever. I don't think, and our listeners are anything but traditional. So you're right at home. You're right where you belong. So we have Jamie, Julie, Audrey, and Andrew. And I have 3 follow-up questions that I want to throw out. And I'll start with Andrew. How's the reality of what you pictured in your head about the counseling profession differed from what you had imagined it would be?
There's 2 different ways that I can answer that, and I'll start with first. I didn't mention it in my last answer, but like Julie, I work in community mental health, and so there's one part of that reality that I was kind of surprising with the reality of it when it hit me. You see a lot of clients, and it's a very fast-paced environment, which is it's kind of against the grain of what we do in the therapeutic space. I very much encourage all of my clients to slow down, and while myself, whenever it's a busy day, it's a struggle to slow down. So that reality creates a difficulty, especially in the long term. So that's a surprising thing. I was actually surprised, on the other hand, how, I guess, easily, because for me, you spend all of these years in grad school, and you speak a lot about theory, and you don't do a whole lot, maybe some like mock therapy sessions with other people, depending on what program you went to. It makes it that I'm learning can easily apply to the therapy room. I actually found that I've had an easier time with that than I have originally thought that I was going to, because for me, I actually meet with my best friend and my wife each week, and we discuss these topics at length. We're going through various Jungian works, and we either discuss them theoretically, but we try to pull them back down into our lived experience. But it can so easily get caught up in this sort of theoretical discussion, and sometimes that translates into having a tendency of wanting to do that with clients, but being able to pull that down into their lived experience was a transition that I found myself doing a lot easier, because I found myself getting too caught up in my thinking brain, part of my brain, rather than sort of the creative and more empathetic side of my brain while I was in grad school. So that transition was a little bit easier.
I think it sounds so beautiful that your best friend, your partner, that you're able to sit down with her and have these discussions and bring it down to a level so that it isn't all theory and it is that lived experience. Jamie, what part of your path felt accidental or surprising?
For me, the part that of my path that felt accidental or surprising is there's a level of comfort that I had when I started programming. Even though I was very extremely nervous, I felt comfortable. But then the surprising part is that I also felt like an imposter at the same time. I had a lot of imposter syndrome, if that makes sense. So, for the level of comfort that I had, it was always like, am I doing this correctly? Or ask the right question, or am I overthinking here? Am I really giving our clients the support that they stand in need of in this work and really doing the work that we're supposed to do? So, oftentimes you have that, it's not a negative self-talk, but more of the, am I doing this right? But I felt like it was so surprising to have because I felt comfortable when I started. And what brings us here? But then it was like, what is going on? So, or that was personally for me, but enjoying the work and feeling comfortable. It's like, oh yes, this is the space where you're supposed to be in, and this is the work that you are supposed to do. But I said that level of imposter syndrome still gets there every once in a while. So I thought that was pretty surprising for me. And I felt like I did oftentimes talk about that with our classmates and, some of the friends that we have gotten closer with since our program. And it's like, do you feel this way sometimes? And then that will go away, but that's the way I was feeling. It looks like maybe others felt the same way.
Thank you for being so open about imposter syndrome, because I do think it's something that plagues us all at every level, and a lot of people aren't as comfortable as you to open up and just say, this is how I feel. So thank you for helping to break down those barriers, that negative stigma on having that. Julie and Audrey, this next follow-up is for both of you because I'm interested, since you're both coming from a different area, what you might do. What would you tell your younger self at the beginning as you were starting out? What would you let them know about what you were getting into?
Well, for me, what would I tell my younger self? I do wish when I was younger, again, it's been a minute since I've been in high school, but I do wish when I was in high school, I honestly didn't realize that counseling was even a profession. I mean, I did know, however, it was those people. They had really big problems to go to counseling. At least that's how it was perceived at that time, right? And my family had no experience with counseling whatsoever. So what would I have told my younger self at that time? I do wish I would have done more exploring. I wish I would have understood more about the counseling field. I feel like a little bit telling my younger self, like, I'm older now. Obviously, there's a certain amount of longevity with a career. By the time you're my age, that's that expectation. I do wish I would have started this earlier. That being said, I also believe things happen for a reason. As cliche as that sounds, they happen for a reason. My younger self, raising my children, trying to work a job at that time, running a business, may not have allowed me the bandwidth at that time to be able to do that. So, what I would tell my younger self, and what I would tell anyone who's getting out of school and considering a career, is to, explore all that's available. Pursue your interests. Look into every little nook and cranny that you can.
This is such a great question, and it's hard because, like Julie mentioned, I have that strong, internal belief that everything happens for a reason. So I would hate to tell my younger self something that would change where I'm currently at, because I'm really happy with, where I'm at, and the process that it took to get here. I think I would fair warn my younger self, though, that you're going to learn a lot about yourself throughout these next years. You're going to apply a lot of the theories to yourself, and you're going to have some questions. You might have to go answer them in your own therapy. But I think that's one of the most rewarding things about getting into counseling and learning about mental health is that I am not the same person I was when I started this journey. I've learned a lot about myself. I've changed, for the better and maybe for the worse sometimes. But it's something that you deeply apply to yourself, and you're gonna, just fair warning, you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn a lot about yourself and why you act the way you act.
Wow. How true. How true that you start to, and it's not psychoanalyzing yourself, it's growing. Truly growing. Yeah. So let's switch topics here, and I'm going to throw out another question to the group. Let's talk about the Therapeutic Alliance, and my listeners know that I think that this is probably the top number one most important thing when it comes to counseling. And I'm curious for all of you, how do you personally define a strong therapeutic alliance?
I think you can tell a strong therapeutic alliance by the comfortability that the client shows whenever they walk in when they can walk in the room and just sit down and just sigh and be able to be there with you and unload. They know whatever they say to you, you're not gonna kind of react any type of way. You're just there for them to support them. Whenever you see that in a client, I think that really shows that there's a strong therapeutic alliance when they're comfortable with you and can just feel open enough to share.
I think it's interesting because I don't know that for myself I can talk about the qualitative part of what makes it, or for me, that presence. I seem to be able to do it, which is something you talked about in your last episode, and that's something I'm going to think about. What defines that for me, and how do I make people feel comfortable? I can tell you though, the opposite of that. When I notice the therapeutic alliance isn't there, and how that feels, and how that must feel for the client. Fortunately, it does not happen often, but it does happen. Maybe it could be situational for that day. Maybe it's longer than that, and maybe it's due to a rupture in the relationship. But I definitely know what it feels like and how it feels for me when I've noticed there's a wave in that, there's a disruption, there's a problem.
I have to agree with both ladies. What they shared so far, I do. I had the same answer Audrey said, that at a level of comfort and at least their presence when people are able to come in, feel comfortable and open with getting started and really wanting to start working on what they've identified as things and needs for them to move forward and grow on their identified goals in this therapeutic space. But I'm glad you pointed out really what it looks like when it's not present, because having one person who has experienced that and not having a strong therapeutic alliance, or and what that could do for a person who, when you finally get to that goal or space where I'm going to start working on this, and when it's not present, that could have that person never come back again. And that could have been me at one time, because I had a great therapist who was her work. I've seen it and what she does, but it wasn't a strong therapeutic alliance with me. So, and knowing that it wasn't like so much of a rupture, like something big happened, we never formed that alliance, we never formed that relationship. So the work she couldn't push me in the therapeutic space to do more because it really never formed. And after I started went back to school and started working with it, I realized that maybe part of it is because we knew each other, or like there was something there that we couldn't have gotten to the work because she couldn't push me. And I don't know about that, so I think it is something as we explore the question of what is a strong, that comfort and presence, and creating that open space and how we do that can be mindful. Also looking at what it doesn't look like. I'm sorry, I hijacked and went another way. Or my apologies.
I have a quote on the door outside of my room, and I think I'm going to carry that with me everywhere I go and put it on the door outside. That says, it's a quote from James Hillman. It says, "I think people come to therapy not necessarily to fix what's broken, but to get what's broken blessed." And that's the mindset that I try to come with, that I'm not here to fix problems. I'm not here to fix people. I'm not here to fix anything, as a matter of fact. Taking the form of almost like a Catholic confession, that I'm here merely to honor what's presenting itself, and I'm here to learn with them, and that might transform me as well. And so that's kind of the with the Alliance, I think of that very much like I have to be open with the client, and I have to be present with the client, and those two things are really the foundation of clients feeling like they're being heard. A lot of them have a lot of traumatic experiences, and their defenses are really high. And obviously, anytime you walk into a therapy room for the first time, those of us that have been on the client side of that relationship, it can be nerve-wracking. So to be completely present and open and not have that mindset that I'm here to fix whatever's wrong with you, it helps to alleviate a lot of the anxiety in me too, that I'm not their parent, I'm not their doctor, I'm merely going in a relationship with them.
I love that you all brought up not only what does the strong therapeutic alliance look like, but it was easier to talk about what it looks like when that alliance is lacking. So that leads me into a follow-up question. As a therapist, when you're seeing that therapeutic alliance is lacking, what do you do to build trust with that person who might be guarded or just slow to connect, or there's been a fracture in the therapeutic relationship?
I'm big when it comes to respecting boundaries. Especially I work with more adolescents, teenagers, and oftentimes teenagers are told, they're wrong, or they're not, they're not doing something right, or you need to do it like this, or this is how we should be doing it. And so giving them that space in therapy in that hour session where they say, I don't want to talk about that, I said, okay, we don't have to talk about that. Let's talk about something else. Like allowing them to just have that space and set that boundary is huge for them, because oftentimes they're like, no, we have to talk about this. This needs addressed. This needs done. Well, for right now, I can respect that you're not ready for that. And we can maybe talk about it later when you are ready. And oftentimes, with that respecting of boundary, they do feel more open to share later on. And if not, then I'm not going to push you, because that's not where you're at right now. And this session is for you. It's not for me or for what anyone else says it should be for. So I think that goes a long way.
I think I tend to kind of go off of what Andrew had talked about. I feel like that therapeutic alliance has been disturbed in some way. I do tend to back it up a little bit, and we kind of go back to the foundations of why we're here. I take that position that I'm not the expert. Maybe I don't word it necessarily like that, but I'm a partner in this. We're here together. Yes, I have knowledge. However, the two of us are working through this together. So I think a lot of times if I sense that that's happening, we do back it down, kind of go to the fundamentals, kind of review where we're at, where they want to go, and take it from there.
For me, I was trying to think of how to put this, but I guess looking from an attachment standpoint, that just trying to mimic secure attachment in whatever way that might show up for those individuals, whatever they might need. I think for example, as a general rule, you can't make somebody be open to therapy if they're not wanting to do it. So you have, I'm sure all of us have been there before with having, this happens a lot with teenagers where they are very guarded and their parents are forcing them to go into therapy for whatever reason they're being forced. And so you can't force therapy on them. And if I act in an anxious way and I'm still trying to prod a little bit closer, they withdraw even more. So if I mimic secure attachment, sorry, Matt, of getting ahead of ourselves here, but sometimes that means silence. That just means giving them a space to just go, if you just want to sit on your phone for 20 minutes, that's totally fine. I mean, I'm not going to force you to talk about anything. If you want to talk about things that you really enjoy doing, I think that's really important. That's where I go with that. So trying our best, even though we're not all there in a secure attachment all the time, just to try to keep that in mind of what does this client need? What would a secure attachment look like in this scenario? And even if that means, you're probably never going to get a whole lot out of them, and that's okay. We're not their parents. We're just there to guide them in whatever way we can.
So, Andrew, since you opened up the rabbit hole, I'm going to toss this question out to you and Audrey because of my personal experience. I'm imagining that you've both dealt with this, definitely. How has your relationship with silence evolved over your career from day one to today? And knowing that you've both worked with adolescents and kids, there's definitely been moments, if not entire sessions, of silence.
At first, very little tolerance for it myself. Just dealing with that internally, feeling as if the therapeutic session is wasted if there is silence. That's a strong pull towards that, because talking or exploring in whatever way that looks like, even if it's just talking about video games, that seemed like more of a win to me. And actually just had a session this past week where we caught up a little bit. We talked about things, and I said, hey, the floor is open to you if you want to get into things. And it was silence the rest of the session, and I kind of informed this client that I'm perfectly fine with this, and I don't know whether it was just me trying to see this, but it seemed like there was more of a relaxation there at the end of that session. So I think that is something that we can all kind of learn to relax with and be comfortable with. I'm like that in my personal life. I really like silence, so extending that to the therapy session is a challenge, but not all that difficult now that I'm starting to become a little bit more confident and consistent in that silence has a deep meaning for us. So
yeah, similar to what Andrew was saying, I think it went from awkward silence to comfortable silence, and feeling okay in that silence. And this is something I did struggle with in the beginning. If you know me personally, I have the gift of gab, and I just went which has its moments, and it's great, but there are also times where we need to respect that silence. And then there was a quote that, I may be butchering, but it went something like, you never learn anything from hearing yourself talk. Whatever I'm saying, I already know. But anything I'm hearing, anything anyone's saying to me is something I can actually learn from. And especially whenever it comes to clients. I'm not here to tell the client what they need. I'm here to help the client with whatever they're going through. And they, I need to provide them that space for them to teach me and to show me things. And I can't tell you how many times it's been beneficial where, like, right when I want to say something, they start talking, and I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we needed. And I've used it so much more even in my personal life now, just like using silence just to give, open that floor for whoever wants to share. Because like I said, I already know what I know.
I love the quotes that we're getting, so thank you for providing those. Jamie and Julie, knowing that the three of us are more of the non-traditional students and that we came in from other backgrounds and had things sort of already set in our bodies on how we do things, I'm curious what nonverbal habits you had to create to help people have a sense of safety early in your sessions.
Well, I have a good example, if I may, Jamie, if you don't mind. So when I first started, I was kind of brought up in the generation, smile or you look like you're mad, okay? So that's, from parents, grandparents, whoever peers at the time, smile or you look like you're mad. So during one of my very first sessions in community mental health, a 6-year-old looks at me and said to me, "Why are you showing me your teeth all the time?" And it really made me jump back and think, I so much appreciate it. I still work with her to this day, but it really made me, you think a smile would be disarming, and, but it made me jump back and think, back to, Andrew talked about attachment early, back to early childhood. What does this individual see in her household, and what does this mean, me showing my teeth, where I'm projecting a smile and I'm happy because she's adorable, but what does this mean to her? So for me, it's really made me look at what am I doing with my nonverbals? How much am I smiling? Is it too much that I'm smiling, right? How much is my past influences, my experiences in my life? What am I carrying into this? And how can I adapt this and adjust it to make sure that I'm meeting the client's needs and making them comfortable?
I love that for us that you shared that, because I too am a person who smiles a lot. So one of the things about my nonverbal, sometimes it's really written all over my face, and I had to, and entering the therapeutic counseling role in space, I had to pay attention to the fact of what this would say, because for our clients, they're coming in, they're opening up about some things that are occurring in their life, and some of them are their lived experiences are pretty traumatic, and I have to be mindful of what my facial expressions are, because that's my personal. I don't want to alarm them or offend them in any way. I want them to be comfortable with sharing anything and everything, but I was one who everything was written on my face. And I was like, whoa, I had to get this in. I don't have a poker face, so I had to really learn. I thought I did, but I wasn't very good at it, even with a mask sometimes. So, it was one of the things that I really had to work on with my nonverbal, to make sure that they were still, our clients were still comfortable in space and able to open up and know it's not judging me, judging you. And sometimes it's your heartstrings, right? So also being mindful of that as well, to make sure that we are able to go and move forward with the work that was necessary. So definitely, I've watched the smiles. I had a lesson with that years ago when I first started teaching, and I was taking over a class. My first teaching experience, actually, and they had ran their teacher off. Quick story. And they were like, "Don't smile at them. Don't nothing. Come in real tough. You gotta lay down the law." And I was like, "Oh," because there was one period in particular that gave, that was the period that put the nail in the coffin for that teacher. And then when I realized that they all came in, and I was like, it basically the emotional support class, because it was a student, my most challenging students from each period were all together in one period. And it was like, we're not going to have a problem. Let's go to the rules, rituals, expectations. It's not going to be an issue, right? I was there like, oh, no. I was like, okay. But it was so funny. Everybody's like, don't smile at them. They're kind of tough. I was like, okay. So you just think of all those things, but it's definitely the smile for me, and definitely that watching that facial expression.
I think we take facial expressions for granted, and we don't always think of them as part of our body language or even nonverbal, because they're so natural. And like you said, I've been in the room and someone has said something, and my inside head is saying that what my body is saying is one thing, while my face is saying exactly what I'm thinking, which isn't always the best thing. And learning to have that poker face, that this didn't faze me, is super important. Let's touch one more question on the Therapeutic Alliance, and I'll ask all of you, what part of building the Alliance feels the hardest right now? And I'm meaning right now as in the phase of your career that you're in, right now that it's April, and you may have people that aren't as consistent as they would be at a different point in time, or maybe they are super consistent. So looking at it as of literally right now, what makes it the hardest?
For me, I would say what makes it hardest is that all of my clients are mandated to be in sessions. They're either a part of a group home or a shelter, and by default, part of that program is me. You get sessions with Miss Audrey. So I think the fact that it's kind of pushed onto them, it's kind of, it's a requirement instead of an option, is my biggest struggle. But giving them that space to refuse when they want to, because hey, it's their mental health treatment and they're allowed to refuse, I think has helped that it feels a little less forced when they know they still do have the option to refuse or things like that.
I think for me, I would say, similar to Audrey, I do have, probably 20% mandated clients, so that hasn't been too bad. But again, someone being there who doesn't want to be there, who has a probationary or parole requirement, that does, have a hurdle to get over initially to build that trust. I think for me, the hardest part of building the Therapeutic Alliance isn't necessarily building it with the clients per se, but being mindful of how I am feeling. I've recently, this is getting a whole different topic, which I won't go into too deep, but changed my schedule because, frankly, on a Thursday at 5 o'clock p.m., when I worked 4 10-hour days, I'm tired. I was tired by then. And, I don't want to say I'm a better therapist on Tuesday than I am on Thursday, but probably at that point in time, when my schedule was so long, so many hours, and I was ready to be done, I was giving it the best I could, given the energy I had. So I would say sometimes being mindful of what the therapist needs too, as far as what's too long of a day, what do these hours look like, what kind of energy can I give at this point in time, I think matters a lot into building a therapeutic alliance. If your mind is, okay, I'm done in an hour, I've just worked these days, I'm exhausted, my head is full, I'm noticing in my mind I have to pay attention, and I'm repeating that in my mind, pay attention, pay attention. I know that's not right for me. That's not right for the Therapeutic Alliance in the long term. I've since changed my hours, but there are still some long days that I have to remind myself, pay attention. This person's important. This matters.
as we have tied up talking about the therapeutic alliance, I'm going to assume, and I'm not asking anyone to self-disclose, that we're each in therapy of our own, that we are surrounded by other therapists on somewhat of a regular basis, that we have supervision with a licensed therapist, so that we are gaining a better understanding of what a competent therapist looks like. And I'm curious from all of you, how is your view of competent therapist changed from day one to today?
It's interesting, Matt, if nobody minds if I chime in, because you talk about personal counseling experiences, and I've had one recently that in my own life wasn't really ideal. So how has that changed from today, from when I started? My personal counseling experience with a therapist has confirmed my understanding and my everyday, my problems, my tiredness, my whatever just happened is not, nor will it ever be, involved in the conversation of the client who is sitting in front of me. Has it changed? No, but experiences in life kind of confirm these things. I will not bring my personal life, personal problems, personal opinions, whatever that looks like, into the therapy space. So it's really just to confirm that for me through personal experiences with counseling.
I think when we begin to talk about competency, I think whenever it comes to counseling, there's so many different modalities that you can be competent in a plethora of different topics, different theories, things like that. And I don't think that necessarily defines what is competence for a counselor, but more so ethics makes or breaks competence for a counselor. I think an ethical counselor is a competent counselor.
We are all back together with Julie, Andrew, Jamie, and Audrey, and we're going to move on to another question. And our other question that we're going to move on to is about imposter syndrome. How did or how does imposter syndrome show up in your body during a session, and what grounding strategies help you to return to the present moment so that you're here in the here and now?
Thank you. I was like, really going through. So, how does imposter syndrome show up in my body? For me, I get very uncomfortable. Like in my stomach, you would think they were butterflies, but they're not really butterflies. More of a feeling of being uncomfortable. And it can be distracting, like you said, especially if you are currently in the moment during a session. And I'm sure you know the stories to make me look around. I think some of the grounding strategies that I start to use is just having some real deep breaths and with a reminder in your head of where you're at, while trying to pay attention to where we're at in the conversation to make sure that I am still following along with the client and I can still, support the work that we're doing in the moment while asking maybe an additional question that'll bring me back. It's related to what they just said, to bring me back into, okay, this is the work we're doing right now. And that brings me back and reminds me where we're here, what we're doing. Refocuses me on, hey, you are actually in session. And you're present, be present. So you want to go back to those grounding strategies, but you can't close your eyes. You can't be like, okay, 5 things you can see here, all of that. But you can do things to remind, like, hey, especially if it's something where you want to ask an additional question, and maybe it's me. I'll say, I want to ask an additional question. but I can't find the words to really ask. I think those are moments where it really comes in, because I know what I want to ask, but I'm not finding the words, and it's like, oh, you should have this. But no, we won't always have that question right away, or be able to format it the way we want to really get them to think about something. So I think it happens more in those moments, and that's when I have to be like, oh, okay, come back, and just ask the question. Just ask for additional information and go from there. But I feel it in my stomach and my gut. And it's not like, oh, good butterflies. It's like, oh, girl, you don't know what you're doing. And then get out of here. So I think that's the way it shows up for me in the space.
Awesome.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think it presents itself more so whenever I'm struggling to find a response to the client rather than just being present with the client. So in times like that, I try to remind myself, like, walk into what they're saying. Let's listen to them instead of trying to pay attention or think about what I'm going to respond to them. Because me thinking about my response isn't actually tuned in to what the client's saying to me. I'm tuning into what I want to say. So by just reminding myself to be present, kind of walk in with the client, listen to them versus listen to a response drive, something usually comes up that I can actually give them. So I feel it more so in my head, like the racing thoughts in my head of like, oh, I could say this, or I could say this, or I could say this, or I could just listen to my client and then it'll naturally flow. So kind of reminding myself to slow down and stop thinking 3 responses ahead and just actually attune to my client.
I think for me, in the moment, it's changed. So let's just say in this past year, it has changed. The imposter syndrome has come down. I've, been more in tune with myself. But initially, it didn't necessarily show up right in the middle of the session. It was a later thing. It was a headache. It was ruminating on what I shoulda, coulda. What could I have done different? I would say it was more that, that stress in the moment I usually got through, stayed grounded, but I paid for that later. Again, with Audrey talked about racing thoughts. Sometimes I pay for it later at 3 a.m., and you sit up in bed and it's like, I don't like how that went, and whatever that looks like at 3 a.m. and not being able to get back to sleep. So, but it's interesting to hear how everyone kind of experiences the same thing in maybe different ways. But
It's interesting that the way that you're each describing imposter syndrome comes very much across as what someone who may be sitting across from us may be saying, that I shoulda, coulda, woulda. I'm having racing thoughts. I can't stay in the moment. So you make it sound like imposter syndrome can be a really great thing to experience because it can allow you to put yourself in the client's shoes for a moment and get a taste of what they may be experiencing. As we're sort of sitting across from that client and we're having our session, there's a lot of questions that come up. The last time I checked, none of us are walking encyclopedias. We don't know everything just yet. How do you communicate your uncertainty or lack of knowledge in a way that doesn't harm the alliance, but it builds trust?
I think it's just very important to be open. And if there is something that I don't know, I can be very transparent to say, I lack knowledge in that area or about that subject, but I'm more than willing to go and learn and read and do some research, ask my supervisor or some of my peers, and come back. And if at a later date we can go back and reconvene on that, or you as the client could give me more information and knowledge there and start my foundational learning of a topic, and then I could go and do additional research. But for me, I'm going to be very honest and transparent. If there's something I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and lie about it. There's no need for me to do that. And it's okay for me not to know, but I'm always willing to learn. That's why we are lifelong learners. Every day, if we're not learning something, then we're dead. So I want to keep living and learning.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jamie's answer is fantastic. I think she just hit it on the head. Just normalizing it. I'm always preaching to my clients, we don't know what we don't know. I'd be a hypocrite if I pretended like I do know what I don't know. So you just don't, and normalize it, and model that it's okay to the client, like model that it's okay to not know everything. And again, just like explore with them, be willing to learn and be willing to open up, because that's dialectical thinking, right? We're not on black and white, we're in the middle. We don't know everything. Just looking to that normalize.
Andrew and Julie, can you recall a moment when transparency with a client strengthened your relationship with them and helped you embrace that in that moment you're being a good enough therapist, that you don't have to be the expert?
Yeah, there's actually a couple times in the last weeks where this has actually happened for me, and one of them was because of self-disclosure, and one of them was just because of reflection of just like, this isn't my area of expertise. I'm kind of curious if we both go home this week and study this together, and we can come back next week with our own reflections, and we can collaborate together. And I like to emphasize that therapy is a collaboration. It isn't me imparting, going back to the encyclopedia metaphor, that information onto you. It's more of a, we're working on this together. So that helps. And I've found really that, because being aware of transference and countertransference, that a very healthy amount of self-disclosure when appropriate is really helpful in helping them to understand that I'm not talking to a robot, and I can't project a lot of my unconscious feelings, or if it's a parental complex or something, but I can't project that onto you if I'm being honest, or it's a little bit harder to do that, at least, if I'm being honest about my own shortcomings in a way that isn't like I'm being therapeutic. I'm asking them to be a therapist, but I'm just letting them know I'm a human being too. And that really, both of those things really help to really ease the clients into, I think, a more appropriate relationship with the therapeutic alliance.
Wonderful.
Like Andrew, I have had this happen recently with a client where, towards the end of a session, I was honest. And I believe in being honest. I said, this is something, and like Andrew, I believe in collaboration. This is not me sitting here being the expert in everything. And I was honest with the client. I said, I need some time between now and our next session to be able to process what you've told me. And she was fine with that. Yeah.
Awesome.
We definitely had a focus then for the next session.
So we're coming up now onto my absolute favorite question that I love asking people, and I'm going to make it twofold. What is your therapist identity, and how has it evolved?
Okay. I'll go with this one, Matt. Mine is continuing to evolve. In private supervision the other day, I expressed concerns that, I am familiar with several different modalities, and I do tend to apply them when necessary, right? It's not a one size fits all. But I'll be honest, this is an area that, I'm struggling with. There's so many choices. I've been in my current position for post masters for almost a year, and frankly, um, it's so busy that I don't always have the time or the bandwidth to think about what I want to do. I'll have a client, again, I mentioned that the diversity as far as even ages, they're 6, they're this age. I have a client coming in with this, a client coming in with this. It's really made it difficult to focus and say, okay, well, I know for sure I'd love to do EMDR. I don't know that yet. So for me, it's still evolving. I'm working on it, and as I go back to what I said originally, things happen for a reason. That's my opinion. It's going to come. It's just not going to come today.
Julie, thank you for being so vulnerable and open.
Yeah, just kind of going off of what Julie mentioned, I think it almost has to constantly evolve, because you're never going to get the same client twice, and it should evolve with the client, right? And I think at my core, I'm person-centered just because of the conditions at which to be person-centered. I mean, we're talking about the therapeutic alliance. How do you create the therapeutic alliance with that unconditional positive regard, that empathy, and that presence, and congruence? So I think at the core, yeah, I'm person-centered, but I am basic trained in EMDR, and I think that for me has really opened my eyes to how impactful trauma is, and how just about everyone we meet has gone through something traumatic. And so it is kind of opening my eyes to that trauma lens, and I think that's something that I will carry with me. But I've also been deeply impacted myself with nature, so I could see myself becoming more nature informed, and going down that path. But like Julie mentioned, that's kind of the beauty of counseling, is that it can constantly evolve, and I can constantly keep learning and adapting and adding new things to help whoever might walk into my door.
I have to add on to Audrey, and Julie as well. Initially, I'm like, this is a good one, because when we finished that program, and you would definitely say I was person-centered. But my first thought ties into what Julie was saying. I'm still evolving. She's still evolving. And I can't say it enough, but at the end of programming, you couldn't tell me I wasn't person-centered. But still growing in this work, still learning, still trying to become my better me in this work, in my life, and who I am as a young woman. As a woman, I'm growing, I'm evolving, so I can't give you a definite on that right now. Like I said, where I was when we came out of programming, person-centered. That's me. Now she's evolving a little bit more. She hasn't. She wants to be EMDR trained. Has read a lot about it, but there are so many other things I want to be trained in as well. So it's like, I can't give you a definite. That's what we said. I am working back through this again now, because I said, even with the work that I do on my regular job, still growing. So she's evolving. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier too, I learned and have been, invested in the Jungian psychodynamic tradition for over a decade now. And the fascinating thing for me is that requires me to essentially be aware of all of the various modalities that are out there, because in in true fashion of person-centered, I'm not here to throw my ideas onto people. This isn't, this isn't like you come to me and we do things a specific way all of the time, and every client has to fit into it. So if I see a client has different needs, like for example, if a client is just in chaos, I spend a lot of time doing what we would call in our, in that modality, ego development, of just developing a stronger ability to maintain healthy functioning in daily life. And that just looks a lot like, well, what does your diet look like? What's your sleep patterns like? How can we maybe get a little bit more structure into your day? When you have anxiety, let's do some different, let's practice some deep breathing methods. Those things are included in that, but it also includes, unconscious work, which I think EMDR sort of dives into a little bit, although that's not the focus, that's not the language they would use. And then it also just dream analysis is also included in that. And something surprising is that I found that clients are very excited to talk about their dreams. So that's kind of been a fascinating thing for me to explore, as well as I've learned and grown in my practice over the last year.
What I'm hearing and what I'm loving is that whether you stepped in with an idea of who you are, or you're still sort of finding it, you're still growing. There is this unending learning. As Jamie said, once I stop learning, I'm dead. And that as therapists, we continue to learn. And basically, again, what we're doing is we're continuing to learn so those that we support can do what? Continue to learn and grow. So it is beautiful. How do you decide which of the therapeutic approaches to use in the moment when you're so eclectic and you have so much at your disposal? How do you know what to pick when?
Is it okay if I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Client driven. Client driven. I kind of go back to what Andrew says. It's that foundational. If I have someone come in, full psychosis, which happens on a regular basis for me, we're not going to talk about it. And I'll go back to Andrew's, talking about dreams, which is very interesting, Andrew. I really like that. But that client is not at that place. That client isn't going to be talking of Maslow's hierarchy. That client can't do the upper parts of that pyramid. We're talking about how can I make this client trust me in the moment, feel safe in the moment. We're talking about foundational things. For some people with depression, for them, a win that week is getting a shower, right? So it's really meeting that person where they're at, being able to assess that pretty quick based on some of the feedback you're getting when they're coming in and they're first talking to you. A lot of that can be done too through intake. We spend a lot of time. I love doing my own intakes. I hope we never get an intake specialist. It's probably a whole different topic for a whole different episode, but but I love doing my own intakes because I get a real feel for where that person's at, what support they have at home. So that's my take.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Julie got it.
I agree.
I'll just reiterate.
Yeah.
I get so excited about that question because I've seen therapists come in and they're jumping the gun. I've learned so much from that. Let's talk about thought reframing when this person can't get out of bed, and that hits me hard when I hear a therapist doing that because I think, gosh, how's that person leaving? When they leave that day, how are they feeling? They're not ready for thought reframing. They're not ready for whatever CBT looks like or upper level things. They had a win this week because they were in the shower. They were eating regular meals. So passionate about that.
Okay, let's talk about the reality gap. We all have talked about that we went through a master's program that taught us a great deal. But when we step into the therapy room, there's obviously things that a classroom just can't prepare you for that you're going to encounter in the therapy room. So, what have you learned in the field that no textbook could ever have prepared you for?
Expect the unexpected. I guess that's especially when I started out at an internship. I was working with younger kids, and like one of my first days at internship, pencil blocks were being thrown, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're in this. So just you know, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with humans. Sometimes young humans, sometimes old humans who might be a little bit more stuck in their ways. So you really there is nothing that you can't expect because you know people are going to do whatever they want to do, and you just kind of have to take that one at a time. And so you know just keep in mind that you're working with humans, and half the battle is also learning how to control yourself in those high stress in high stress times. Being able to remain calm, cool, collected, so that way they match you and they co-regulate with you rather than you co-regulating with them.
Audrey, I find it fascinating that you're starting out stepping into a world where things being thrown past your head, you need to be on your feet and prepared. And I stepped into the therapy room from a world where that was the norm, and no one throwing something at me, no one having a meltdown was like, oh God, what do I do? You're not having a major quote unquote crisis, or at least not what I was used to seeing as a crisis. Would anyone else like to jump in with something that no textbook could have ever prepared them for in the therapy room?
I think textbooks are great for introducing modalities and things like that, and making creating awareness of them. There is no step 1, 2, 3. I think having experienced myself even through like undergrad and working in residential crisis unit and stuff like that, there is no step 1, 2, 3. DBT is fantastic. There's a lot of skills with it, CBT, but you're not going to sit there and think that one size fits all, because it never will. For me, I remember someone saying they, not in school but outside of school, they use CBT exclusively, and I think, how could you? I can't see that applying to every situation. I could see it validating some people, but I think that understanding that in grad school they're creating awareness. It's introductory into this is what's out there. This is a little glimpse of how this can be used. And the understanding that it's not a step-by-step method, and it's probably not even going to be one modality that you use. It is multiple.
There was one thing, and I was trying to figure out how to word it, that I've kind of experienced the gap between, and something that people don't prepare you for in all the books that I've read on the subject, which is a lot. They don't really prepare you for what do you do with a client that you're seeing, and you work really well together, and you have these really great conversations, and you decide on a great plan, and then you come back and you discover that week after week, and that turns into month after month, there is no movement on them. They do, like, you have great conversations with them, but they're just, for whatever reason, they're at this place where they're not going forward. Maybe they're not even going backwards. Sometimes they do, but they're not. And that gap is difficult to reconcile. And sometimes in community mental health, they will just say, "We'll just discharge them, or we'll see a different therapist, or something like that." And at the end of the day, we're dealing with sometimes people that have experienced a lot of trauma, and that comes with a great deal of defenses, and sometimes those things take years to work through with one person. And especially if we're trying to build a secure attachment style, that sometimes does require years, because if we're dealing with heavy abandonment and that develops into some kind of a complex where they're just kind of repeating those same patterns, that takes some time. And having the patience in the moment, and while you're going through this month after month, that sometimes the biggest spiritual practice that you can do is just remembrance and presence, and sometimes that's just enough at the time. And that's not something that I ever read. That's not something I was ever prepared for either.
I think everyone on here shared great answers, and hit every thought that I had. But I say, if I had to definitely answer this, the one thing that no textbook in this field ever prepared you for, although we talk about it, is the termination of the relationship, the counseling relationship. And after we can sit here and say, we worked with a client, and as we prepared, I'll give an example of one who'd been through a lot of trauma, as we've touched on, and being present, talked about the goals, and there were some things that they were still working on, but had been through a lot, and we had to terminate because they were going into and a higher level of care, or a little bit more, but was most appropriate, so it was okay. But just saying, I'm going to be okay. She's like, I'm going to be okay. I wish I could still see you, but I'm going to be okay. And that you terminate, you have the conversation, we prepare for the termination of the relationship, and then you worry. You know what they've been through. You've been there. We've been weeks and weeks and weeks of conversation with you. Even though we know the termination of relationship, I still say those books and all our conversations are not very equal. I do wish you well, and I'm praying that is well and be okay. But knowing what they've been through, and after they told you so much, you can't help but worry. And my personal belief, you're not prepared for that. Young, old, no matter. I've had them very young, as Julie said, and older, but those younger ones, when you know what they're going through or what they've been through, you tend to worry. Or I'll speak for myself. Persons grow immediate local to me, I was worried. So then I wasn't prepared for that.
There are people I still think about from 25 years ago and worry about. And, they were 3 years old at the time, so now they're 28 years old. I could pass them on the street and would never know who they were. But we're human beings, we're social creatures. For everyone, we've all had some form of supervision, be it administrative supervision, clinical supervision, licensure supervision, supervision in a past profession. What has been the most meaningful part of supervision for you?
Meeting you guys. And I mean that with my whole heart. having that support with you guys, being able to talk through different challenges, different wins, having you guys support me, is huge. It's huge. Because you can feel alone on an island when you're in that room just with you and the client, and it's so important to know that you're not. People are going through similar things, and putting heads together to really work through something that's difficult is huge. I always joke that I love working with counselors because they're some of the easiest people to work with. They're some of the best coworkers normally because they're some of the most understanding people. So yeah, truly creating that community and having that support it goes a really, really long way.
I have to add on to what Audrey said. Although I'm not in the bigger group, when I started with supervision, myself and Matt, and really, like Audrey said, working through and having a conversation about some of the things that we were encountering during our internships and scenarios, and really having that time to talk. But one of the things that I loved about our supervisor is that she saw me. She knew when I needed pushed. She asked the right questions. She really paid attention. So in the quiet moments, because life was lifing, she would come in there, and there was that pushing those questions or conversation of like, okay, what do you need right now to make it through this time? You want to get through what's going on. Is there anything I can do to support you? And I think that's important, because a supervisor who knows where you're at in your seasons, in your moments, will meet you where you are, but still push you toward the goal. And that's what I appreciate about Lauren. She is that when she sees you, and she'll ask those questions. And then even after I got out and I'm going through an internship, because I had a little more time when we graduated, I still had more internship. She didn't stop. She still called to check in. She still made sure. It's like, what are you doing? Where are you at? And even after we finished and I went back to work, and because I was still doing internship here, and then I had another site too. She was like, that's a lot. How you hanging? She was still checking it. She was still pushing it. And it's like, all right, I got to take the test. I got to start studying. I was like, okay, what are you going to do? But she still was always, even now, still, okay, what is your plan? Where are you at? What are you doing? Because she saw me. And even then, sometimes when I get quiet, because she'll leave me with something, and then when I get quiet, then she'll pull back, and she'll be like, back holler. And then she'll come back around. She'll be like, okay, let's follow up where we left off. And I appreciate that. And I say the Lord surrounded me with the people I needed, because to ensure that I started and finished. It was not, Matt, I had Melina. Look, it was like, come on. It was like, we were doing this together. And then at the end, on graduation day, you had to see it was all of us. But you saw, like, Matt and they were sitting there. They're like, she's coming up the hill. They're like, where's she at? She's coming. It's like, park right here. Do this. But it was that supervision we had weekly. It didn't matter where I was. Because most of the time I'm coming from work, I'm on supervision on Matt. And then even our individuals that I had with her. And I really, really appreciate that when you have a supervisor who is really caring about your growth in the work and still pushing you towards the end goal of you being your best you is so important. Sorry, that was a little lengthy, but
No, it was perfect.
Not sure I can add much more than what Jamie and Audrey added. I mean, it's very true. Yeah, you guys have been great. It's like I like the podcast that you did, Matt, where you talked about the differences between, because we so usually use the word supervision, supervisor in this field, and the difference between private supervision and employment supervision and different things. It's every week it's my safe space, because I can feel it building up. I have individual supervision Friday, I can feel it building up. Tuesday group, I can feel it building up. I sometimes just need to, maybe it's not even something I need to express. It may be that someone's at a similar point and it's normalizing this experience for me. So that's what I've got a lot of it, not only the guidance, but just normalizing those feelings that are building up, whether it's that feeling of the imposter syndrome, whether it's, I don't know what I'm doing today, just it normalized.
To jump back in, just having to process that time. Some of the scenarios that we are presented in, they're crazy. They're not crazy, but they can be challenging. I was like crazy, but they're
Challenging, that's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, sitting here in my mind, someone's telling me this, and I'm like, girl, this is what I want to say, but I can't. But I want, but I can't. So in that moment during supervision, I really enjoyed being like, I really want to say this, but I can't. And it allowed me to just be me. I think I made in the counseling space, but that was alright. They're like, it's okay. Yeah, it's understandable. And then having some different eyes and input. So
I love how you said that, Jamie, because I feel like so much of the counseling space, we can be who we are as counselors. But that's maybe where it builds up for me, because you can't be who you are as a person, and you sometimes need to get that out. Like, I just want to tell them, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard, but obviously it's not. It's not, well, but it's not the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but, I have feelings and emotions too, right? And we're taking this all in and keeping this composure, which that's our job. That's our job, but we still have those feelings. We still have, I like how you said that.
And while understanding that people do life differently, this is our individual lives. And I'll tell you, I didn't always make the best choices. And sometimes my mother would be like, that was really stupid. Moms are free counselors. And they don't hold back. But
for better or worse, yes.
they look bad. No gray, black, white.
Andrew, anything you want to throw in on this topic?
I don't have anything to add. No, this is a great discussion.
I will add in real quick that one of the best memories I have about supervision involved Jamie and Lon, and Jamie and I had been given an assignment, and I was freaking out about it, and Jamie was cool as a cucumber. It was like, it's not that bad, and I was having panic attack after panic attack, and Lon, as the supervisor, validated both of us that we were both perfectly fine to be reacting in the way that we were, and that we would make it through it. And that gave me the strength to take the deep breaths and calm down, and because I had that island out there that I could go to with the two of them and be safe. All right, we're going to talk about our last topic, ethics, boundaries, and burnout. How much fun is that? What ethical gray areas or boundary challenges have become easier over time for you?
I can say that I feel like with community mental health, it's easier to maintain that sort of distance between clients, between sessions, because almost all the calling and everything is done through our office or our desk. So I don't get those kinds of often, and maintaining that sort of, well, where's the line here between, we talk professionally, and I might send them some, tools for that. They're like, hey, I saw this the other day, and thought that you could use this as related to our conversation. But other than that, there's really nothing else. So that kind of makes it easy in that sense. I can definitely answer the burnout part now, though, too. That is a real serious one that I've really struggled with throughout my time there. Even as, generous as they were to let me go part-time while I was there, because I was very close to quitting because I was just too overwhelmed, and that was the one thing that would have been able to go. That to stress this enough, like proper rest, and being willing to say no to my supervisor or the CEO that is saying, hey, you need to be doing these extra things, and just saying, no, I'm not going to do it. That I'm too overwhelmed as it is. We got to figure out something else that I'm going to work in. Also, finding some kind of grounding practice that works during work and after work. Myself, I found some really gentle workouts, such as Tai Chi, Qigong, or just some very light but centering weight training programs. Those do exist. Those types of things are really good for post everything's done. I need to just kind of shake off all this energy that I've taken on throughout the day. But those things cannot be avoided and cannot be put to the side, because those are primary for my well-being and to be there for my clients and myself, most importantly.
What are some early signs that tell you you're approaching burnout?
I think some early signs that for me that I'm approaching burnout is really resting. And not really eating. I shouldn't do that now, but when you're not resting, it's very important, and not taking and dropping off that. Like Andrew said, you have to find things to do, but there's also what I learned from my other clinical supervisor at Waynesburg is that you have, when your day is done, try to wrap everything up and leave it there. And make that break. And she said it's very important that you do that so you can, you won't get the burnout. So when you're carrying it with you, it kind of just lingers, and it becomes one continuous cycle. And when she was trying very hard, Miss Jo said, I love that. She was like, no, wrap everything up. And those notes finished, said, done. And let your drive home be one where you decompress so you can have yourself when you get home. And being I had a nice long drive from their home, I love that she made that the prompt. And it was something, on any day, let the windows down, put your music on, do what you need to do to just be able to decompress. It's very important that you make that practice, because the work is already heavy. So if you find your way to manage this in a healthier manner, it's just it's very important that you make sure you eat throughout the day. Make sure you, like you were saying, get your rest. Because how is it that you're trying to be a helper, don't help everyone else, but don't take care of themselves? And that doesn't work. Because that's a fast trick to burnout. So the same things that we encourage our clients to do, sometimes we're hypocrites and try not to be that. So thus, therefore, trying to work smarter and better for myself, because when you're stronger, what's the saying? You can't pour from an empty cup. So how do we work on being better for ourselves, so then that we can go ahead and pour into others with the necessary things to support their work?
So one final question for the entire group. What's one self-care practice that each of you do that genuinely helps you to stay human?
For me, something that I have added into my daily routine since taking on this counseling position has been meditation. free plug for the Insight Timer app. That's my favorite, personally. I do a daily meditation every morning, and it sets me up for success throughout the day. And it really, truly, I think the biggest help is it slows me down. And it allows me to be present with my client with that mindset of like, let's take things slow and let's work through it a step at a time instead of being worried about getting through everything. So that's a self-care practice that I've implemented since taking on this counseling position that has done wonders for me, truly.
I need time outside. I need time outside. My windowless office does not permit me that. I don't step outside the entire day. I don't have time to. So I make it a point every day. I need to spend some time outside. I need to hear outside sounds. That's relaxing to me. So my self-care hasn't been the best lately, but I am adding at least one thing in. If I can make it 1% better, being outside makes it 1% better.
The first one that came to my mind that I mentioned earlier was Qigong. That's like a moving meditation, very calming and grounding. That's something I do every single day that I do therapy, sometimes twice a day, depending on my needs and my workout schedule. I also love spending time outside of the office where I currently work. Matt, you would know this, that outside there was a little picnic area where there was a creek that ran by there. There's birds, you can see deer there. It's quite nice to be able to do that. And then also, I found that instead of while I'm at lunch, I like to just be present while I'm eating my food, but also some quiet reading has been really restorative to me as well.
I'll say I'm still working on the self-care, but I love to listen to music, so all different kinds works for me. Drive, because I have to travel a lot with work, but also just to or from, just windows down. Now, spring is spreading through, but even when it was a little cold, just feeling, being outside, but in the open air, just letting, thoughts of travel. I think one of my biggest things is that I love looking at water pics. So when you travel, people who travel, like oceans, rivers, like even going to Mount Washington and just looking down, those are all water things for me, but loving the ocean and beaches and water pics over there. And time with family, time with friends. Very important. But wine is good too. Wine is good cootery. Yeah. Love that for me.
And for me, it's the need to have some creativity, which is this podcast. It's spending time with family and friends. And I hope that you all know that you're not just colleagues, you're not just peers, but you are friends. And I thank you all dearly for coming on today. This wraps up season 1, and season 2, I'm going to do some things a little bit differently. We're going to have sort of the same type of episodes that we have had, but I also want to bring people on to do interviews and talk to them. So hopefully each of you will come on and do an entire episode, just the two of us, chatting about your experience, who you are, where you're going, and things like that. Any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Thanks for the opportunity. I felt like this was a great way to connect. And I think that is very important as we move forward in this work together. But thanks for joining us. And I wish you all nothing but blessings and greatness. Right?
Same, thanks, Matt, and I appreciate the podcast. I've used them, your podcast, I guess I could use that as one way of self-care. I've used them, it's a lot of grounding. Your voice is very calm, it's great. So I've used it for some grounding, just a bad day, and, it's a good podcast that makes me feel Again, 1%, sometimes it's just 1%.
Thank you all. Julie, Andrew, Jamie, Audrey, thank you so much. Everyone out there, if you found this beneficial, share, like, and remember, we're always unlicensed as long as we continue to grow. See you next time.